Approaching a customer at a portfolio level is the only way you move from being a MedTech vendor to being a true partner. Welcome back to the Outcomes Rocket. I'm Saul Marquez. Most MedTech teams are still selling one product at a time, launch to launch, hoping that the next thing hits big. The companies pulling ahead have actually figured out how to sell the whole portfolio and to do it with revenue discipline instead of a pile of disconnected campaigns. This episode is a live panel that I hosted with Caitlin Mayer, who leads U.S. marketing for Medtronic's Acute Care and Monitoring division, how to go from portfolio to pipeline. We cover the research behind it, the ambulatory surgery center strategy her team ran with, and what actually happened to the business as a result. Let's get into it.
Portfolio to pipeline. And it's this idea of how do you go from just one product to the portfolio sell? And how do you do that quarter over quarter to have success? And so let's start with introductions. I want to start off by Caitlin. Go ahead and kick us off.
Hi, everyone. Caitlin Mayer. I lead the U.S. marketing organization for Medtronic's Acute Care and Monitoring division. We offer respiratory and perioperative monitoring solutions that span across the hospital as well as post-acute. We also offer digital and connected health solutions. I've been with Medtronic for 15 years, always very much focused in on marketing, public relations, integrated marketing. And now I've really found where I love to be, which is very much downstream working with our field organization and closer to customers. So happy to be talking about go-to-market strategies today.
And I'm Saul Marquez, CEO of Outcomes Rocket. Been in MedTech for just under 20 years. Medtronic, Stryker, NuVasive, either sales and marketing. And really excited to be covering this very important topic with Caitlin and for this room. All right, so we did a survey of 511 B2B go-to-market experts. And what we found is that 37% of marketers that focus on go-to-market have a revenue discipline. That leaves 63% that don't. A lot of the efforts that happen are disjointed, and that's where the big opportunity is in driving a revenue discipline. And so we do some really great work with Caitlin and her team, and I want to talk about that revenue discipline. Talk to us about how to, just from launch to actually full portfolio.
Yeah, I think approaching a customer and really a go-to-market strategy at a portfolio level is the only way that you can move from being a MedTech vendor to being a true partner. You know, our customers talk to us about problems that are complex. They're still dealing with staffing shortages, working on improving overall throughput with really limited access to any sort of capital budgets in a lot of instances. And so we want to make sure that we come to our customers with holistic solutions. So it's not just our products, our individual devices, but we've built out a whole portfolio of services that really help us add additional value to customers. One example of that is super simple, but it's taken off. We have a service offering that's really targeted to help biomeds unbox, set up their monitors. There are shortages across the hospital. Obviously, we have IT services and education, but when you come to a customer with that holistic service and portfolio offering, then the conversation is less binary. You come with a thing to address a problem, that thing may or may not hit. When you come with a solution offering, then you leave the conversation open to continue to figure out ways that you can help your customers. The other thing that our team has talked about quite a bit is clinical value is kind of table stakes. We all have to go through the FDA process. And so thinking about ways that you can offer workflow value, economic value, that's what's really going to differentiate us and make sure that customers are going to get the most out of the investments that they make. And one other piece, so Saul's team and my team partnered, and he'll talk about it a little bit more specifically on the ambulatory surgery center space. Talk about an area of care where you need to offer workflow efficiencies. They're so focused on overall patient throughput. And so you need to not just go in there with an individual device, but really thinking about how to integrate the technologies into their workflows and make sure that they're getting the most efficient outcomes possible.
When we did this research with Caitlin and her team on the ASC space, customers we're asking for another story. We're talking at leaders at USPI, at SCA, at AmSurge, HCA. What is exactly the need? And a lot of what came up to the top is what Caitlin and her team ended up executing on the portfolio level. And Caitlin, talk to us about kind of what happened as a result of that.
Yeah. So the work that we did with Saul's team really helped inform our holistic go-to-market strategy, starting first with positioning, like I just mentioned. We're not going to lead always with clinical value. That, of course, is super important regardless of the space. We're all in healthcare, but really making sure that we're focused in on that workflow aspect and the economic aspect is super important in ASCs. So first, how we positioned our overall portfolio. The second was targeting. So the last stat that I saw in ASCs is there's 6,500 ASCs in the U.S. And so there was no way that we could even take a crack at this market without getting very, very targeted and focused on a procedure level, but also thinking about how you segment the ASC market. And then our go-to-market strategies in partnership with Outcomes Rocket, we're going broader, but very educational. So rolling out podcasts, talking about challenges that they're facing in the ASCs, webinars, of course, digital marketing, and then creating marketing resources that our inside sales team can launch from their homes out to the market. So overall, the research that we did in the collaboration with Saul helped us shape a go-to-market strategy that's led to we had 19% growth in this space last year. So it's an effective strategy. We've been doing really well, thanks to Lindsay Alexander on my team, who may see this recording. So nice work, Lindsay. One last thing, if I may.
Yeah, please.
The other thing with this ASC space is, and I'm sure you're all familiar, it is evolving every month. Just in January, the CMS Center for Medicaid and Medicare Services added 500 new covered procedures to ASCs. And these procedures are complex cardiac procedures, ortho procedures. And so the need for more advanced technology is going to continue to expand. And our go-to-market strategy is going to need to continue to evolve as this market evolves.
Yeah, thanks, Caitlin. And it's been impressive to see Caitlin and her team do what they've done with the insights and then go to market with it. The procedures that continue to shift, we're starting to see the same needs, right? The needs that you see in the hospital, the acute needs actually are increasing because of the number of procedures being done that are more complex. So it's really great to see the team shine there. Thinking about some of the things that we had, operational and cost effectiveness, HCP satisfaction, with the decreased number of anesthesiologists, keeping them happy was a big thing. Going beyond the product, outcomes, these are all things that came up to help shape the portfolio. Caitlin, back to that different stat, 30% of companies say sales, marketing, product, and customer service are not well aligned. And if you add clinical in MedTech, it gets even worse. Talk to us about how you sing from the same hymn sheet.
Yeah, I can feel that statement for sure. We took a step back from that and said, we're not having that big of an impact. And there's a lot of different groups that touch our customers. So how can we think about this differently? And so when we kick off fiscal year planning, it is absolutely cross-functional, bringing together marketing leads. We've got strong marketing leaders across the organization. Marketing leads the conversation, but our sales team is part of it. Med affairs, clinical, training. And step number one is really reflection. So the team comes together and takes a look at some of our performance metrics. Marketing brings to the table, our overall revenue growth, our market share trends, our ASP trends, any sort of market research. Then MedEd brings in, what's going on with new guidelines or society partnerships. Sales brings in new customer insights. And the team really sits down and through that analysis says, what's the one thing, and this is really hard for a team to do, but next fiscal year, what is the one thing that we really want to shape or impact? And the team hashes that out and gets to a place where it's one key metric that we want to drive. And I think that's what really makes it impactful. Everyone's working towards something greater than their individual job. And of course, people write out their specific tactics that are going to drive to that goal. But I think it's what inspires people, right? You're working towards something bigger than your day-to-day. That's worked really well for us. But again, the trickiest part is what's that thing to focus on?
One of the questions that we asked in the interviews that we did was, where do you get your information from? That's why we started focusing on podcasts and webinars with clinical studies inside of conference panels. These are some of the things that came out of that. And just being able to have that one view and be able to communicate it across those different channels has really made a difference. As we think about all of the things that Caitlin mentioned, just staying on that single page is the biggest thing that you could do in order to go from portfolio to pipeline. It's been a lot of fun working with Caitlin and her team. And Caitlin, I don't know how you would close the session out. What thoughts would you leave them with?
Yeah. I think the biggest one for me, the biggest learning over the last few years is having that singular focus and aligned incentives. That's the way that you can have the biggest impact to your business and ultimately to your customers and patients.
If your team is sitting on a portfolio but selling it one product at a time, one launch at a time, that's exactly the gap that we discussed on this panel. If you need some help on that, re-listen to this episode or reach out to us. I want to give a big thanks to Caitlin Mayer and the Medtronic team for participating. A huge thank you for the Device Talks team for inviting us to be a featured panel. And another huge shout out for Lindsay Alexander to execute insights and make them a reality into business success. And we want to thank you for listening. Keep making an outsized impact. We're here to inspire each move.